favorite mashups is, I think it's the Beatles and Joan Jett and Cypress Hill mashed together. It's a great song, putting some of their songs together. I love musical mashups. This is going to be a spiritual mashup. I'm going to do a series of these, putting some very far distant types of concepts, mash them together, and so we can see inherent truth coming out of the concepts I'll be introducing. So we're going to mash up today something called the Song of the Pearl and Fight Club. Tyler Durden in particular from Fight Club. Pretty confident no one's ever put these two things together before. But we're going to go through each of them and we're going to see how they come together. Now the Song of the Pearl comes from Gnosticism. It's been around a few thousand years, and it's a story that tells of a young man who his parents sent out from the east. His parents sent out into the world, actually sends him into Egypt. He takes off his bright robe of glory, okay, and he comes into the world. And he's sent on a mission. What's his mission? To find a pearl. And he's told that the pearl is in the center of the ocean, and it's being guarded by a snorting serpent. And his job is to go find that pearl. So he comes into the world, and in order to fit in, he takes off his robe, robe of glory, and he puts on the clothing or the garments of the people that he's around. And then he eats their food. And then he falls into a deep sleep. And then he forgets the pearl. So he's in the world now, and the mission is still there, but he forgets what he's supposed to be doing. Because he's taken on the food, and he's taken on the clothing and the culture of the people that he's around. Well, at some point in his narrative, he ends up hearing an eagle that flies out of the night. Reminds me of Salisbury Hill, Peter Gabriel. And the eagle flies out of the night, and it delivers him a message. And the message is from his parents in the great beyond that reminds him, wake up, son, you're supposed to be finding your pearl. He remembers he needs to go find the pearl, and he has to face the serpent. And so when he goes to find the serpent, which is snorting at him, he needs to charm it, he says. He has to enchant it in order to put it to sleep. And he does so. And when the serpent goes to sleep, he grabs the pearl. And then he takes off with the pearl. And guess what he gets to do with the pearl? He gets to put his robe back on, the robe of glory, and he returns to the kingdom of heaven. And there he gets all the applause, he gets all the praise, and he's received, welcome home, good job, you found the pearl, you fulfilled your mission. Okay? And part of that receiving the pearl is exactly what gnosis is. And we'll talk about that after this lecture. But the gnosis is the clarity that he has, the crystal clarity, and the sense of peace and his direct connection to his God. Well, let's talk about how we do that. How do we charm the serpent? And what is that serpent? How do we enchant it? Well, this is where Tyler Durden comes in from Fight Club. Now, I'm going to play for you guys after I talk about this, I'm going to play for you the Song of the Pearl. It's about 9 minutes, so you can hear it yourself. But I don't have time to play Fight Club for you, okay? That's a couple hours. If you've seen it, maybe you remember some of this. But in this movie, you've got one character who's being represented by two different people. In the Song of the Pearl, when he finds it, he ends up recognizes that he had been two halves in one form. Okay? It's duality. Well, in Fight Club, something similar is going on. You have one character, but there's sort of two halves of him. There's the alter ego, played by Brad Pitt, and then you have the narrator, which is Edward Norton. And Edward Norton's going on this journey as well. They call it Project Mayhem. And a lot of crazy, chaotic things happen. And the Brad Pitt character, who's Tyler Durden, at least for a while, seems quite aggressive, and he seems like a really angry guy, and he seems like he's violent too. But he's teaching, actually. He's teaching Edward Norton's character all along the way. And what are some of the things that he teaches? First of all, Edward Norton is struggling with insomnia, and he says he's partly awake, he's partly asleep. Well, that's us too. Especially if you're on a spiritual journey. You have some wakefulness qualities, but a lot of times we're still asleep. We're eating the food of our fellow man. We're buying into the culture. We're buying into the mindset. We've forgotten the pearl, the one thing that we're here to do. And Tyler Durden teaches them that which you own eventually owns you. Because we're here gathering all this stuff, and we're fighting over stuff, and we're trying to say, I need more stuff, or we need to share the stuff, and it's all about stuff. Once again, we've forgotten the pearl. He teaches the narrator that we have to give up our possessions. When we do so, we're truly free. And then he emphasizes through most of the movie how important pain is. That's why what they're doing in Fight Club. They're actually fighting each other, and they're pushing each other to experience greater pain that they accept. instead of what most of us try to do, which is avoid pain, and we seek pleasure through our possessions. Well, this is what the serpent is. The serpent is the human ego. Its job is to seek pleasure and avoid pain. Now, we're not talking physical pain. This is a metaphor. Just like the Song of the Pearl is a metaphor, so is Fight Club. It's a metaphor. It's not about the physical pain we experience. It's about the emotional pain. It's about all the stuff, all the baggage we carry inside ourselves, the resentment and the shame and the guilt and the fear and all of that. That's the serpent. And we have to charm that thing somehow. Well, here's how Brad Pitt's character does it throughout Fight Club. He teaches him he has to embrace the pain, just like they say in Revolver, embrace the pain and you will win the game. And to embrace the pain, when you know what he does a few times, he actually forces pain upon Edward Norton's character. At one point he cuts his hand and he pours lye on it and the chemical burn. Edward Norton starts screaming wildly, right? And Brad Pitt's character says to him, this is your pain, what you're feeling right now, it's premature enlightenment. That's a crazy deep line in a movie, okay? Pain is premature enlightenment. The problem is we keep resisting. We keep saying, I don't want this. I wish this didn't happen. That's the opposite of the Tao. In order to connect to the Tao, in order to find the pearl, we have to somehow understand the pain has a point. If all we do is try to avoid pain down here, we're going to ignore Buddha's first noble truth, that life is pain. We can't avoid it. It's going to happen. So as it comes to him, at one point he's screaming and then he falls to the ground and Brad Pitt's character says to him, congratulations, you've hit rock bottom. Okay? Because at that point we can actually start to make some growth. At that point, once we've hit rock bottom, we're going to start to go in a different direction. We start to embrace our emotional pain instead of saying, I don't want it. Tyler Durden calls it a great spiritual war. That's what's going on. A lot of the movie seems like it's a cultural movie. It's about the state of materialism, and that's absolutely true. But we've got a deeper war going on. What we're ultimately obsessed with, what we're most addicted to, is our bodies and our humanity. And there's nothing wrong with that on one level, but there's that second level. There's the spiritual level. It's two halves. It is duality. We have a physicality and we have a spirituality. And we have to merge these two things. It's a great spiritual war. And it's happening inside each one of our heads. This is where the serpent is guarding the pearl. Remember, it's at the center of the ocean. Well, the ocean is consciousness. It's our mind. And at the center of our heads is where we're going to find the pineal gland. And that's the seat of the soul as it's been described. It's also a place that releases DMT that allows us to have some spiritual experiences. And we have to find that in the center. And it's in a great sea being guarded by a serpent. Well, what's the serpent? The ego. The ego that's saying, you're different than me. I'm different than you. You're better than me. I'm better than you. You're wrong. I'm right. Right? That's what the ego does. And yet, what if each one of us has a pearl to find? And all that stuff we just talked about, and all the various isms, and the things that we like to argue about, it's all irrelevant compared to finding that pearl. Because if we come down here and we take on the culture and all we do is argue about rightness and wrongness, now we've got the great Rumi saying, there's a field beyond right and wrong. I'll meet you there. The fact is, what we're doing is seeking a pearl whether we know it or not. And everyone's doing this whether they know it or not. So Tyler Durden tells them, you got to forget what you know. He uses a different F word, but he says, you got to forget what you know, okay? You think you know. And most people walking around, that's what the ego is. Certainty. I know what's right and wrong, and this is how things should be. You ain't going to find the pearl that way. We have to lull it to sleep. You know how? By doing the opposite of what the ego wants. By loving our enemies, right? By resisting the emotional qualities that we have that lead to hate. By telling other people that they're wrong. Be righteous in that response. That's something that the ego hates. And the serpent gets lulled to sleep. When he says, take the pain, he tells them, you have to stop trying to control everything. It's complete submission. The word Islam means to submit. Muslim is one who has submitted. When we lull the serpent to sleep, what we're doing is stop trying to control. Now we're embracing and we're accepting everything that the Tao teaches, right? To go with the flow. To understand that you're not in control. You're just supposed to find the pearl. That's your one job. That's the centering that we're all able to do. Once you find that one pearl, you know what it is. It's gnosis. You don't need to argue with anyone else. As it says in the Tao, the sage doesn't speak, he waits to be asked. You don't need to go force your opinions on other people. Muhammad says that there is no coercion in religion. Truth stands out clear from error. Because once you found the pearl, you don't need to convince other people how they're wrong. Jesus said, I am what you say I am on the cross. He was done arguing once he found the pearl. All the prophets found the pearl. Buddha awakened and found the pearl and said, hey, all of us can find the pearl. That's essentially his first insight, that we're all Buddha. We have to go through a process of detachment, though. And that detachment is recognizing there's a serpent guarding a pearl. And that's the ego in all of us that's guarding wisdom or gnosis or the great light or the spirit or however you want to call it. It's inside each one of us. So perhaps my favorite scene to pull all this together is a moment when Tyler Durden is getting beaten up. They're in a basement and the owner of the club that they're at comes downstairs and he starts punching him. And every time he gets punched, he laughs. He gets beaten, he starts to bleed, and he starts laughing more and more and more. It seems like such an extreme violent thing, but it's a metaphor, okay? What is a metaphor for? It's for the emotional beatings that we take on the inside. It's Apostle Paul, great teacher of helping to find the pearl, who says we must rejoice in our sufferings. That's how you tame the serpent. That's how you put the serpent to sleep. You somehow rejoice in your sufferings. So Brad Pitt, while he's getting beaten up, is laughing because he understands. He understands what's really going on. And all the destruction that's happening around him, Project Mayhem, is ultimately waking him up to the nature of the true self. In the end of the movie, the two integrate. And all of a sudden, I won't ruin it for anyone that hasn't seen it yet, but at the end, narrator, which is Edward Norton, he says, I'm fine. Because why? At the end, he had gotten through the mayhem, and he had integrated, which is all of our journey. He had taken the two halves and he put it into one, and the pearl was inside of him. What do we have to do? Well, we're all on the same journey. We're all looking for a pearl. There's a serpent that's in front of us. We have to learn how to charm that thing. We put to sleep by embracing our adversity, somehow rejoicing in it. When we rejoice in our adversity, the ego hates that. The serpent goes to sleep, and we find our pearl.